Hello, YouTube family, my stolen cousins. Mm, how y'all been? Good? That's good. Okay, so today we are going to be watching, obviously, you've guessed it, yep, some more horror animations. I guess this one's supposed to be true Stalker horror animations, so let's just get right into it. I'm excited. I hope you're excited too. Mm. SSG Animations, gotta give them a shout out as always. SSG. We'll start it anyway. Alright, let's get going. Oh, if you're here, please subscribe, like, comment, and share. You can share if you want to. You don't have to. But we're a family over here. So support your family because support is free. Yeah. Thank you. Looking crazy already.
It happened on the 14th of May, 2008. I had started seeing him around work, a
Mm.
month before that day. I remember the very first time I spotted him. I was on a lunch break with my friends at work, and he was standing outside the restaurant, staring at me. I recall my friend Allison saying, "It looks like you have an admirer, Noelle." And that's when I looked up to see her pointing at him. The man looked like he was in his mid-30s. He had green eyes and a medium build, and his black hair looked unkempt. I assumed that was all it was at first, as I told myself that he was just an admirer. But
I hate the phrase admirer because it's like, like it's like a crush, but someone who doesn't want to reveal they have a crush on you. You know, I don't like it because they often go from, oh, he was a secret admirer to, then he became my stalker. Like, I don't know what we could say instead, but I don't know. Or maybe just stop using the term for romance, possibly, and start using it more for, strictly like stalkerish terms. I don't know, possibly.
it didn't take long before I realized in the following weeks that he was something much more than that. I thought I was crazy at first, as I assumed I had started seeing things. I thought I had seen him at my dentist a few days after the first time, as I could have sworn he was the same man sitting across the room and spying on me through a magazine.
You see, not at the
The next
dentist.
time I saw him was when I quickly spotted him at a party for one of my friends, Charlotte. These strange sightings just kept increasing from there, and I told myself it couldn't all be crazy coincidences.
It's not.
I wasn't the type of person to jump to a rash conclusion about something, but as I kept spotting him everywhere I went, I soon realized that this man was a stalker. The first thing I thought about doing was to call the cops,
As
but
you
after
should.
putting in a lot of thought, I didn't. I figured I didn't have any solid evidence to prove that this man was stalking me. I mean, it was a very small town, and I knew telling the police I was seeing someone everywhere I went wouldn't make a proper case. Plus, it was my word against his. It was a dangerous decision, but I decided to wait for more substantial proof against this man before I took it to the police station. I did, however, take the necessary measures to protect myself in case things got much worse.
Yes, men, women, carry pepper spray, carry tasers. If your town allows it, the city you're in, state, whatever, please carry something to protect yourself. If you are not registered to carry a gun, carry something as simple as pepper spray.
Knowing fully well that this man was my stalker now, it was as if I constantly had a pair of eyes looking at me throughout the month of April. I had started seeing him much more frequently as I spotted him in my neighborhood and around my house. Things continued like this into the month of May, and it wasn't till the 14th of May that he finally confronted me. I was walking home from work when I heard footsteps behind me. I didn't need to look around to tell who it was. I already knew it was him. Luckily, I wasn't too far from a public place, so I increased my pace. But right before I could reach it, my stalker caught up to me. I was frightened, but I kept my composure. And before I could say anything, my stalker looked at me and said,
"I'm sorry, miss, but who are you?"
I was baffled at his statement, as I wondered why he, of all people, would ask me that. So I said, "Excuse me? I'm the one meant to be asking you that question. You're the one who's been following me around, you sick freak." My stalker now had a surprised look on his face as he realized I already knew what he had been doing for the past month. So he looked me dead in the eyes as he said,
"Yes, I have been following you around for the past month, but that's all your fault. Don't act like you didn't start all this. You made me do this. So tell me, who are you?"
What?
I was convinced now that this man was probably clinically insane, as I had absolutely no idea what he was talking about. My stalker, who now had an annoyed look in his eyes, continued with,
"Look, I've tried to go about this the nice way, by following you around and trying to figure out what you did to me. But I can't take it anymore. Tell me the truth. Tell me why. Why am I seeing you in my dreams?"
His last
What?
statement confirmed my suspicions, as I knew for a fact now that he was crazy. I didn't say anything, as I had nothing to tell him, and I knew anything I said would just make things potentially worse. That's when he screamed the words,
"Answer me!"
as he made his way towards me. I then told him, "Stay away from me, you psycho, or I'm going to scream and defend myself." My warnings fell on deaf ears as he kept approaching me, so I screamed at the top of my lungs. I knew we were close to a public area, so my scream attracted attention, and it wasn't long till someone came running in. It was a young man who had been jogging alone, and immediately he reached the scene, he said,
"Are you all right, miss? I heard screaming."
My crazy stalker then made another statement that baffled me as he looked at the young man and said,
"Stay away from her, man. She's dangerous."
The young man, who wasn't convinced, then looked at me and said,
"Do you know this man, miss?"
So I quickly responded with, "No, he's an insane man who's been following me around, and he just threatened to attack me. That's why I screamed."
"Leave her alone, sir, or I'm calling the cops."
But my stalker didn't leave as he replied,
"You don't understand. She's the evil one here. Why can't you just see that? I didn't want to hurt anyone else. But you leave me no choice."
and with that, he attacked the young man. They struggled for a while, and it gave me some time to reach for my
beating
phone and
his
call the
ass.
cops. I tried to leave after I made the call, but it wasn't long before my stalker took down the young man and made his way toward me. I knew running away would be pointless, so I stood my ground, and right when he was about to attack, I reached into my purse and brought out my mace. I didn't hesitate as I sprayed it right into his eyes.
Good.
He fell to the floor screaming, and I could finally hear the police sirens in the distance. An investigation was opened up, and I told the cops everything I knew. I also provided them with a recorded voice note of the whole incident. I had started recording with my phone when I heard him walking behind me earlier, as I knew it
When
would
did you
be
do that?
undeniable evidence. All this in addition to the witness testimony from the young man, the case was already closed. I remember during my questioning, an officer asked me,
"Are you sure you don't know this man? He seems pretty convinced that you do. Plus, we've checked his records, and he hasn't committed any prior crimes before this."
Watch that be the biggest twist.
So I responded with, "I can assure you, officer, that I don't know that man. Maybe he went mad or something, but I truly don't know him and why he did all this." The officer then responded with,
"Okay, miss. We'll see to it that this man is punished accordingly. We'll call you if we need any additional statements.
As I walked out of the station, I had a smile on my face, as
Look
my
at
little
her!
white lie had convinced them all.
Little white
I
lie? This ain't
actually
no
knew that
little white
man,
lie.
and his name was Charles Reed.
Mm.
I had seen him in a coffee shop about 3 months ago, and I fell in love with him. I followed him around till I found out where he lived, and most nights, I would sneak into his house and watch him sleep. I eventually took our relationship to the next level, as I would often drug him with a psychedelic drug called psilocybin. It's a drug that distorts a person's sense of reality and puts them in a dreamlike state. That's when I would climb into his bed and fondle him. I know this modern-day society would see this the wrong way, but I've realized this is the best and only way for me to have relationships, as I'm not really an attractive woman, so there's always a possibility of being shot down.
So you're
Plus,
drugging?
it's
So you're stalking people, breaking and entering, drugging them, and then fondling them while they're sleeping. Just because you're not attractive and you don't want someone to be like, nah, girl, you're not that cute, get up on my face? That's crazy to me.
so much better than dating or getting to know each other, as I'm just getting to the good parts. I always ask myself, what's the point of going through the entire hassle of dating if I can just get to the best parts?
Are you in jail now?
Most of you wouldn't understand, as modern society has put all these fake values into your heads. I live my life like an elite human, as I see what I want and take it, no matter the costs. It was quite unfortunate that it had to end up like this, as I had hoped he'd just let it go, like my other partners.
Why wouldn't he
But
let it go?
he had to be inquisitive, so I elaborately set this entire thing up to get him off my back. I heard he was charged with stalking and attempted assault, so he'd been given 3 to 4 years. And while it did hurt me to know that I wouldn't be seeing him soon, I was fine with it, as I already had my new prey in sight. His name was John Miller, and he was my co-worker at work. He never really pays any attention to me, and I know he doesn't see me that way, but in the end, none of that matters, as I know.
What's crazy is she's not even approaching these men. She's not even approaching these men. Hey, would you want to go on a date with me? She's not even taking the chances of getting shut down. She's like, why would I take the chances of getting shut down when I can just stalk them? It's crazy because there's people out there that really thinks like this. You see, it says 3 true stalker horror stories in the corner. So this is someone's true story. Whether it's hers or if it's his, like, or if it's another way just flipped, it's somewhat real. Ridiculous.
He'll be with me tonight.
Like, what are you really doing?
Hi, my name is Michael, but you can call me Mike. I'm going to tell you about one of the worst experiences in my life that people rarely believe. During my early 20s, I played in a rock and roll band called the Four Tunes. We got together during my first semester in college as a way to bond with some of my classmates. But as it turned out, we were actually pretty good. What started out as a way to release stress gained traction. Before we knew it, we were playing paid gigs in our local dive bar in front of a mostly inebriated audience. This was fun and provided us with a few extra bucks that any broke college student would appreciate. As the semesters rolled on, our band grew in popularity throughout the campus, and our dive bar performances grew into headlining shows at local venues. The few extra bucks multiplied to non-negligible cash. We grew into the status of local celebrities, often being stopped walking to class by smiling girls with a request for a selfie with one of the 4 T's. But soon we graduated and began our own lives. For me, Marcy and I had been dating for 3 years, so I decided it was time to put my rock and roll phase behind me and move on. We disbanded after playing one last sold-out show on New Year's Eve. Marcy and I moved across the country, where we held a beautiful wedding. A year later, we welcomed our beautiful Tammy into the world. Slowly, the days of ear-bursting music and alcohol faded behind me, and I fell into the routine of a regular office job and role of being a loving father. Then, Michelle came into my life. I first saw her, before I actually knew who she was, outside my local coffee shop on a snowy morning. I ordered a coffee and sat at a table, checking my email and browsing news headlines. A sensation of being watched came over me. I looked around the shop, but everyone sat preoccupied with their business. The feeling persisted, and that's when I saw her. Standing outside, in 6 inches of snow, was a young, attractive woman. Her light brown hair was bright, covered entirely by a blanket of snow. Her attractive features were distorted, however, as she stared, unblinking, with a wide smile on her face. I looked around, wondering if anyone else was seeing this odd sight. The coffee shop continued its bustling life unnoticed. I continued my business, trying to ignore her. But there she stood for 45 minutes, staring at me with eyes that lacked life. Discomfort overcame me, and I decided to sneak out through the back exit. Before I did, I glanced back one more time. She remained as still as a statue, the only movement coming from her chattering teeth between her wide smile. I exited out back. When I glanced around the corner, she was gone. 2 days later, I sat on a bench waiting for the subway to arrive. I had dropped off Marcy and Tammy at the airport. They were visiting my in-laws. I stared forward, wondering what I would do with an empty house. My headphones drowned out most noise as I stared at the dense foot traffic through musical eyes. Throughout the busybodies, one was still. She stood on the other side of the tracks, a few feet away from the yellow line that serves for caution, bodies swarming around her. I stood, and a flicker of joy altered her unmoving face as our eyes met. She began to make her way towards me, but I grabbed my things and decided to walk home. The next day, I woke up with great anxiety. I had dreamed of Michelle's lifeless, smiling face chasing me through the subway tunnels. I jumped in the shower, attempting to wash away her image. I got dressed and threw a quick glance out my second-story window. Of course, I whispered to myself, spotting that face that haunted my dreams directly out my side window.
Again?
Her face was craned upwards towards me, covered in snow.
I could
How
never.
did you fucking find me? I whispered. I had had enough. I grabbed my coat and stormed downstairs. The combination of cold air and wet hair shocked my body, but my fury fueled me on. She remained unmoved, smiling at me. Listen here, I said in a low and harsh voice. I don't know who you think you are or what you're doing, but you gotta cut it out. Stop following me, stop staring at me, and stop fucking smiling at me. Michelle stood there, unchanged. Last warning, I said harshly, turning around and heading back inside.
didn't say dip to start coughing. But what if she did something to his legs? Because he was walking in the beginning of this. Well, he was in a wheelchair in the beginning of this. And he was walking in his backstory. So, what if it was her?
You're not going to get rid of me,
she said in a high-pitched voice that reminded me of a child.
We're supposed to be together, Mike. We have to be together.
Her volume dropped with the last sentence. It was barely audible.
I warned you,
or something.
I said, continuing into my house. The anger and adrenaline began to wear off after a few minutes, and when I looked out my window again, she was gone. I was not surprised when Michelle continued making appearances in my everyday life. In the week my wife was gone, she was everywhere I was, like an unwanted shadow. She lurked behind grocery counters while I shopped for food. She sat in a nearby table when I went to dinner with a friend. Every subway trip, morning walk, coffee run, she was watching me with the creepy smile on her face. Sunday evening, I got an Uber to take me to the airport. My wife and daughter were landing from their trip, and I was eager to greet them. I bundled up for the trek that would be from my doorstep to the car. A snowstorm was pummeling through our city. Chin down, protecting my neck and chest from the brutal winds, I walked into the back seat of the black Toyota.
She got him.
Good evening, I said between shivers. The car sped away. I shook the snow off my shoulders. Crazy night? I asked. When a response didn't come, I looked forward and realized the idiotic mistake I had committed. Even from the back seat, the smile on the driver's profile was unmistakable. Michelle sat behind the wheel. The car picked up speed. The door's automatic locks clicked.
La la la.
Now you gotta beat her
tried
up.
She began.
To get you to understand this, I've tried doing this the nice way.
Her voice was high and childlike. I don't even know who you are, I said, mustering my bravest voice. I fidgeted at the door handle, which remained locked and controlled by Michelle.
Really, Mike?
She asked sharply. Her head turned to look at me. Cars honked at her as she flew through a red light. The car continued to gain speed. Keep your eyes on the road! I screamed. The car approached 60 miles per hour, but the icy conditions made the matter much worse.
You don't remember me?
She whispered.
I was 4T's biggest fan. I was at all of your shows, screaming your name.
She continued to speak in a low tone, as if realizing something sad. Cars swerved out of the way to avoid colliding with us.
I was always there,
she repeated.
Girl,
there was a tense moment of silence, interrupted only by the engine's acceleration strain.
No matter,
she said matter-of-factly.
I'll make you understand. We're going for a little ride.
She reached over and pulled a small pistol from her purse. My brain went into emergency mode. I had to get out of here, now. Should I attack her? That would certainly cause a car crash and perhaps me getting shot. She reached over to her purse again and brought out a small knife. She sat smiling,
a knife
gun
and
in
a gun?
one hand, knife in the other that she held the steering wheel with.
Don't you get any ideas?
Her smile was back. I didn't give myself time to think. I jumped for the gun that was being held by her hand. In her panic, a shot was fired. The explosion echoed in the car, leaving me momentarily deaf. The car skidded into oncoming traffic, avoiding collisions by some miracle. I hesitated for just one moment,
Are you shot?
and that was enough. Between my burst eardrum and near-death collisions, I gave Michelle the second she needed. Before I realized what was happening, she plunged the knife into the side of my neck. An explosion of pain and blood erupted. I fell back onto the seat, grasping
What would
my
you
neck.
be right there?
Michelle regained control.
Okay, right. If you're you're ever in a situation like this, my best advice is obviously, like you just got in a car, you just got in an Uber, regardless of, panic, what you got going on, because not everybody got a stalker chasing them. Not everybody does. Sit behind the driver. So if anything crazy starts to happen, you can yoke them out from the back seat. You can choke them out with their seatbelt. It don't even look like she got her seatbelt on. If she does, you can choke her out with her seatbelt. Like there's a lot of possibilities. Not like he just stood there and got stabbed, or shot. It's a lot happening. Excuse me. Like, oh my god, this is so crazy. He got stabbed in the neck. Like, I don't understand why you were sitting right there where she can stab you.
Of the car. I saw no other option. I slammed at my door. The window cracked like a sheet of ice. I tried again, causing glass to rain down on me. I lifted my body, my bloody body, and hurled myself out the window going 60 miles per hour.
And this is why...
My landing was soft, but quickly the cold and blood loss caused my body to go into shock. I landed on a small pile of snow that had accumulated by the side of the street.
So you're
My
paralyzed.
last memory before losing consciousness was seeing the taillights of the Toyota drive away. I woke up 2 days later at my local hospital. My 2 girls were by my side. I was connected to all sorts of machines and was immobilized. After severe blood loss, nerve damage, and damage to my spine, I have been condemned to a wheelchair for the rest of my life. It's difficult at times to stay optimistic, but at least I still have my life. In hindsight, I never reported Michelle because I thought I wouldn't be believed. When people talk about stalkers, it's usually a male predator pursuing a female. I hope no one ever makes the mistake I made. Men?
He's probably going to say something along the lines of what I'm going to say, but as a man, you can report some stalking. You can report some sexual assault. You can report abuse. Just because you're a man does not mean these things cannot happen to you. I hate that society really has put that men can't be abused or assaulted or any of that, because it's definitely possible.
Don't ignore your stalkers.
Call the cops on the ass.
When I was young, my family lived in a very friendly neighborhood. Each home in the neighborhood looked alike, and all the people living in the neighborhood cared about one another. I had plenty of friends living in nearby homes. We all used to play in the community playgrounds once school was over. My mom was a housewife, and my dad worked in a bank. Every evening when the kids went out to play, the mothers would gather in one of the homes to chit-chat and spend time with each other. A few houses down the road lived my best friend, Megan. Most of the weekends, Megan and I had sleepovers at each other's homes. Megan's mom, Mrs. Xavier, was a good friend of my mom, too. Once there was a fair in town, and my mom was unable to take me, so Mrs. Xavier offered to take me along with her daughter. We sat on the Ferris wheel, ate hot dogs, and watched a magic show. I was maybe 8 back then, and so was Megan. Miss Xavier was with us throughout our visit to the fair and enjoyed all the activities along with us. However, in the middle of our visit, I clearly remembered Mrs. Xavier just held our hands extra tight and asked us to get to the pizza place as fast as we could. Back then, I didn't think much about it, as I thought she must really be hungry despite having a hot dog a few minutes ago. Later that evening, she dropped me off at my home and had a chat with my mom before driving home. After she left, my mom told me to be careful while returning from school and to always be with my friends or in a group. A few days later, I was playing in my drawing room and my mom rushed from the kitchen and closed all the windows and blinds and locked the door. Hey, Mom, what's going on? I asked, confused. In a shaky voice, she replied, Nothing, sweetie. She then rushed toward the phone and called Dad. They had a long conversation, and a few minutes later, police showed up on our doorstep. I was more confused than ever and didn't know what had happened. But before I could ask anything, my mom sent me to my room. The police checked the whole house and spoke with my mom for a while and left. Dad was home sooner than normal and comforted Mom as well. I had no clue what was going on, but I didn't dare to ask. A few days later, when everything seemed to be back to normal, Megan and I had made a plan to go to the park together. As her home was closer to the park, I walked up to her home and I waited on the footpath for Megan as usual. The footpath leads to the park. Now, I must tell you something about myself. I enjoy peeling the sap off trees. I know, you may think this is creepy, but hear me out. When I was about 4, I learned about trees in school. I also learned that we bleed if we cut ourselves, or even if we peel the dead skin off our fingers. So, I was always curious, did plants bleed too? I used to peel the sap off a tree to see if it bled, but it never did. So just like any other day, I started scratching the tree lightly with my fingernails and peeled the sap. This tree didn't bleed as well. Before I could turn around and see if Megan was there yet, a big, creepy-looking old man came rushing towards me.
What are you doing, you little girl?
He asked me. He looked very angry and maybe a little irritated. Nothing, sir. I was just waiting for my friend.
Then why are you peeling the sap of the poor tree? Do you think it's funny? You think trees don't have feelings?
He was practically yelling at me now. No, sir. I'm sorry. I won't do it again.
Run away.
I replied and tried to back off, but the man stepped right in front of me.
Are you trying to run away, you little bratty girl?
He sneered at me, and his creepy smile freaked me out. But before I could say anything, Wendy, darling, sweetie, what are you doing there? Get inside. Megan needs a few more minutes. It was Mrs. Xavier. Her kitchen window faced the footpath, and she must have seen me with the man. The man was taken aback when he heard Mrs. Xavier calling me in. I ran inside her home, and as soon as I was inside, she locked the door, shut every window, and closed all the blinds, just like my mom had done a few weeks ago. Then she called the police and asked them to get to her home immediately. I was sitting in the kitchen eating cookies, clueless as always. She told me that Megan was in the shower and would come downstairs any minute. Then she called my mom and narrated the incident with the man and told her that I was okay. But before I could question her about what was going on, the police sirens could be heard. The next thing I know, the police had swamped the area. The sheriff came inside Megan's home and spoke to Mrs. Xavier. I opened the kitchen blinds then and saw the man who had been yelling at me being arrested. I ran outside and said, "Hey, Mrs. Xavier, is the man being taken away because he yelled at me?" To which Mrs. Xavier and the sheriff looked at me funny. "She has no clue, Sheriff. We decided not to tell the girls to not scare them," Mrs. Xavier told the sheriff. He nodded and left. "Tell us what, Mrs. Xavier?" "Sweetie, your mom is on the way, and she will explain everything to you once you get home," Mrs. Xavier said, and left to speak with the cops outside.
So why would you say
The
that in
big,
front of
angry man
the,
was gone by now,
like why would you
and the
say that
police
to
were
the cop in front of
investigating
me?
the area. That's when my parents arrived. They thanked Mrs. Xavier for helping me and took me back home. Mom, will you tell me what's going on? Darling Wendy, there is nothing to worry about. The man that yelled at you was a bad man. Mrs. Xavier told the cops to take him away. That's it, kiddo. Don't worry.
Why should
Go
it
to
be
your
like her
room now.
daddy or something?
My little self believed what my mom said,
Because she don't
and
look like
soon
her own dad.
we all forgot about the incident. Or maybe I thought so. Last year, when I visited my parents for Christmas, we all went down memory lane, and the incident with the bad, angry man came up. I made a joke about how a guy was arrested for yelling at me. To my adult self, it was quite hilarious, as my parents occasionally yelled at me, but never got arrested for it. But as I looked at my parents, their faces were pale, and there was a flash of guilt there. My dad said,
Wendy, dear, we haven't told you the whole truth about that incident. You were so young, and we thought it would scare you, so we didn't say anything. But, sweetie, that man did much more than just yell at you.
Dad, what do you mean? I am so confused. Sweetie, do you remember that the police had stayed in the area long after the man was arrested? My mom asked.
No.
Yes, I do, Mom. Wendy, they were there because they had discovered the man's car. And darling, what they found inside, it was the stuff from a mother's worst nightmare. You know nothing about it because Dad and I kept the information from you. But the truth is, he wanted to kill you, sweetie. What was in his car, Mom?
What the fuck?
His car was a van, and behind the driver's seat, the entire back area of the car had pictures of you. Some of them were taken when you were at school. Some were of you in the park. And some of them were of you sleeping in your room.
Oh, I don't know.
Hearing my mom's words, I was visibly shocked. Mom, you need to tell me more. She was crying now. You remember when you and Megan went to the fair with your mother? That's when Mrs. Xavier spotted this man following you guys. She was scared and took you to the pizza place and then called us to let us know. Then, again, I spotted him lurching in front of our home. We believed he was your stalker, Wendy, and he wanted to kill you. But why did he want to kill me, Mom?
No one knows, dear. When he was arrested, the cops tortured him to know his motives, but the man just laughed or stayed quiet. They declared him mentally insane, and to date, he is locked up in an insane asylum.
The next few months, I tried to gather as much information as I could about this man and decided to visit him. I wrote him a letter announcing my arrival. When I went to the asylum to meet my potential murderer, the receptionist told me that Mr. Frank, or the man who tried to kill me, had passed away a few days ago. He had received a letter from a girl, and the next day he died. Yes, the girl was me, and now I'm narrating this whole story, standing in front of Frank's grave, with an unanswered question in mind. Whose answer was dead in the grave along with the man? Why did you stalk me and want to kill me, Frank? Why? I guess only dead Frank knows.
That's crazy. That was alright. That was alright, right? That was pretty cool. Well, I don't know what I was expecting. I think I just listened to like a lot of Let's Read, and his stories are like crazy. So I was kind of low key, expecting a little worse. But it was okay. All stalkers are bad, But thank you for joining me. Have a great rest of your day, week. It's close to the weekend, so Have fun. And if you haven't already, please subscribe. Why? Because this is a family here and support is free. So support your family. Yeah. Bye.